Hi folks, Dave, the Honest Audiophile. This is the Tin Hifi P1 Max, and these are my Honest Audiophile impressions. I want to thank Linsoul for providing the Tin Hifi P1 Max for review. Do greatly appreciate it. Linsoul, you rock. Alright, so the Tin Hifi P1 Max. $170 on Linsoul. It has a 14.2 millimeter planar magnetic driver, 16 ohms, 98 decibels of sensitivity, and a frequency response of 10 Hz to 20 kHz. And it includes a copper cable that has 108 single crystal copper core. And it connects with 2-pin. Pretty straightforward unboxing, but it is fairly nice. So you undo the end and you get this little presentation box. Take the lid off. You can get a little bit of paperwork. Certificate of authenticity. Your P1 Maxes are going to sit there, and then inside this little flap you're going to get some tips and a little carrying bag. You don't get a case with this one, which I found was interesting, and you just get this little canvas carrying bag, which isn't bad. I did not use it. And then you get some foam tips, which I also did not use, and then you get a ton of silicone tips, and you get two different types of tips, which is an interesting choice, but I'm glad that Tin Hifi is giving various choices. And so you get these ones that are red stemmed, and they're a little bit more narrow in their bore, and then you get black ones which are slightly wider, but both of them are kind of that olive grape shape. Did not have a problem with either one. I found that the red ones, for me, tended to make things sound a little bit more warm and lush. And the black ones kind of balance things out a little bit more. But neither one was like bad or good. I just I'm alright. I did change the tips and I went with the Moondrop spring tip. And that was just because both of the stock tips tended to have just a little bit lack of air up top, in my opinion. And I found that the spring tips kind of added that in. It was just a little bit wider. And I just found that it kind of added just a little bit of airy presentation overall. I find that the accessories are very good. I find that everything that's included is appropriate for the price tag. You get a ton of tips. You get 3 of the red stems, small, medium, and large, and then you get 5 sets of the black, like extra small, small, medium, large, and extra large. As far as the IEMs themselves, find that the P1 Maxes are very kind of generic looking. They have this unique kind of chicken wire mesh type of design on the shell, but they're just kind of a standard universal. Nothing really extravagant stands out here. Resin shell, a decent nozzle, good angle, and overall it's just pleasing to look at. Nothing super special, but I kind of like bland looking IEMs, so this one kind of goes for me. They're extremely light, less than 5 grams each shell, and the cable is very nice. I really like the cable. It's well controlled. It does have a little bit of a rubbery feel to it, but it's less tacky rubbery feeling than a lot of others that kind of have this same build design. Very well controlled. Straightens out nicely, terminates into 3.5. You got metal casings for the split and the terminations, and then you do have metal for the 2-pin connectors. Now normally that bothers me, but because of the design of the shell itself, did not bother me whatsoever. And I find that isolation is okay. They're not the best at isolating, but they're adequate. They're probably somewhere about 55 to 60% of outside noises is blocked. So normal, typical office settings, light noises around outside are going to be okay. If you're going to use these in louder environments, mass transit, that type of thing, they probably won't be the best, but they're adequate for an IEM. Build, comfort, I like them. I can wear these for hours on end. When they go in my ears, they just disappear. I have no problems whatsoever wearing these for hours upon hours. I did have them in my ears at one point for 6 straight hours with no discomfort. Of course, that may differ for you. But we're not here to talk about all that. We're here to talk about how they sound. But first, before we really delve into the sonic signature of the P1 Max, we need to talk about how they sound on different gear and how they are powered. And I found that the P1 Max is kind of picky. My usual go-to dongle, the Periodic Audio Rhodium, the P1 Max was just kind of, it was alright. My next go-to, the Next Drive Spectre X, it was kind of like, it's alright. The X Duo Link V2, it was, this is not even as good as the others. And what I was hearing was kind of bloaty, boomy bass and kind of sharp and sibilant highs. And it was just kind of like, it's alright, but something's lacking here, and it's kind of fatiguing and kind of bothersome. Then I went to the Hifi FC4, and this has 4.4 balanced out, and a little bit more power than all the others. And, okay, I found a dongle that works. The Hifi FC4 changed the whole thing for personal portable use. It was crazy good. Clean, clear, that bloaty, boomy bass was gone. It was very detailed. It has nice impact and slam. And then that treble and those upper mids that were sibilant and harsh and kind of fatiguing became well controlled and defined. And I was like, okay, you can use the P1 Max portable, but the only one that really sounds good for me, Hifi FC4. So if you're going to use the others, as far as like a DAC, you may want to get something like a topping NX7, which will amplify it and give more power, and it does clean up the sound. I found that those other dongles going into the NX7 with the P1 Max sounded a whole lot better when it was being provided more juice. So you're going to need a portable amplifier if you're going to use a dongle of some sort or straight out of your phone. Going over to like desktops, the Mytek Liberty DAC played it just well. It was fantastically presented and just sounded, I love listening to the P1 Max on my Mytek Liberty DAC too. Going into the head amp GSX Mini or the Drop 1 Linear sounded just fine. Aueze Deckard, it also sounded very good. And I just liked it on desktop, had no problems with it whatsoever. Portable use as far as DAPs, I did have to use it with the 4.4 on the Sony WM1A and it sounded better. Using it on the 3.5 out of the WM1A and out of the A105 and AP80 Pro, it was just kind of, it was alright. But I just knew it could do better. So, P1 Max. It's not the most hard planar to drive, but it is picky. And you have to remember, it is a planar, and it does respond well to a little bit more. Alright, how do the TINHIFI P1 Max sound? The TINHIFI P1 Max are a very neutral, natural sound. I find that the bass of the P1 Max is very well defined. It has good details and clarity, and it does a very good job with resolution. The tone and timbre of the bass is excellent. I find that the P1 Max does a very good job of giving you all of the information, keeping it balanced and controlled with just enough impact, just enough slam. Now, there's a little bit more mid-bass focused than sub-bass focused, but it will reach down and grumble and rumble a little bit. But for the most part, this is a very this is the information that you want, and we're going to present it as is and not over accentuate things and not over elevate it, but we're going to give it to you the way that it is supposed to sound. And the P1 Max does a very good job of that. I do wish at times that it had just a little bit more authority, just a little bit more texture to things. But overall, I find that the bass is very pleasing and very accurate and true. Going into the mids are very well controlled. There is a slight elevation, which is normal in the upper mids. Now, it's not super elevated and it's not super recessed throughout. It's a very balanced and cohesive mid. It has a very natural tonality to it, and just like the bass, the tonality and the timbre is accurate and true. I find that it's very well detailed and has very good resolution. The mids have a cohesion about them and a presence about just a naturalism of things. Everything sounds proper and true. Instruments sound even and accurate. And if a piano is being played hard or soft, or you're going through the octaves, it sounds appropriate. Guitars sound true. Brass instruments, woodwinds, all the other instruments sound very, very real, is the word I would use with the P1 Max. And then the balance between instruments and vocalists is very even keeled and very true. If a vocalist is closer to a microphone, it will reveal that. If an instrument is closer, if things are being more elevated and presented to kind of highlight it, it shows that. It does a very good job of presenting the stage as you would imagine it being recorded. The treble is very even keeled, and it has a slight elevation around 8K, which is lower mids, upper treble, whichever way you want to look at it. I look at it as lower treble, and that has a very nice presentation, adds just a little bit of air to the presentation, and adds just enough sparkle and energy without being too forward or too aggressive. And then the treble extends really well, and you get a nice presentation throughout. So overall, I find that the frequency response of the Tin Hifi P1 Max is very neutral. There's not anything that really stands out, and it has a well-controlled presentation that's even and cohesive and balanced, and has the natural aspect. So I would consider the P1 Max to be a neutral, natural IEM. Soundstage. Now, Soundstage is interesting because a lot of people will say, oh, it's not very wide. But actually, it is. It has the natural soundstage to it. So if a stage is small and intimate, like a studio, it's going to show that. If it's going to be a small venue, like a jazz club or a theater, it's going to present that. If it's bigger and in size and more grand, it's going to do that. And it doesn't present large every single time. It kind of moves with the venue of the recording, according to what my imagination would say. That's what that venue would be like in real life. And then it has really good depth. You can really read into a stage. You can really diagnose the rows and the seating. And it has very good layering. Everything just kind of cohesively plays together. And imaging. You can take the littlest of details and just follow it across the stage. You can hone in and just really diagnose a stage with the P1 Max. I really, really do enjoy the soundstage of the P1 Max. It's got a different presentation than most because a lot of things are going to sound a lot wider, a little bit more stretched, whereas the P1 Max is a little bit more accurate and true. Overall, I find that the P1 Max is just a pleasant sounding IEM and a very accurate, true, neutral, natural. How does it compare to some of the other gear in its price point? So you have the Shure S12s. Now the S12 is going to come across in a more bold and aggressive presentation. It has a slightly more body and impact and a little bit better texture in the bass. And then the mids and treble are way more elevated. It's going to come across as a little bit more bright and a little bit hot at times. And it's going to reveal a little bit more detail retrieval and do slightly better in resolution. But overall, it's going to be just a more intense listen. Then you're going to have the Timeless. Now the Timeless is a little bit on the warmer side, a little bit more on the fun side, and it is more forward slightly in the mids, and you're going to get a little bit more presentation as far as vocals are going to be a little bit more centered, and you're also going to have a little bit more sparkle and energy, and it's going to sound a little bit brighter up top. You're going to have a little bit more area of a soundstage, but the Timeless isn't as detailed or as resolving as the P1 Max. Then we're going to compare it to something that's not a planar, and that's the the Moondrop Kato. And the Moondrop Kato and the P1 Max are very, very similar. And when you listen to them, and you listen to the P1 Max sounds more like a dynamic than it does a planar. It has really good tone and timbre, just like the Kato. And then it has basically the same amount of detail retrieval and a little bit better resolution than the Kato. And overall, the presentation of them is very similar, with the Kato just being a little bit more forward in the mids, and a little bit more emphasis in the mids than over the P1 Max. And I find that the Kato and the P1 Max complement each other very well. They do things slightly differently, but sound very similar. And I was really surprised at that. Kato has a little bit more airy of a presentation up top, and the soundstage is going to be a little bit more stretched and a little bit wider sounding. But overall, the P1 Max and the Kato sound fairly similar, especially in tuning. P1 Max. This is the planar that doesn't sound like a planar, sounds like a dynamic. This is the planar that is the best tuned, has the best tonality and timbre that I've heard, and this is the planar that is my current favorite. S12's close. If you want to be a little bit more analytical, get an S12. But if you want to be accurate and true tonality, tone, timbre, and have the presentation that's just natural and accurate, get the P1 Max. It's been Dave, the Honest Audiophile. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video. Speaking of next video, somewhere on the screen, subscription links and notification bells. If you haven't already, please check those off. Don't forget to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to the video. Also, check out all the links down below. There's all kinds of information down there regarding how you can contact the channel, follow the channel, support the channel. All that kind of stuff is down below. And then there's also information regarding music recommendations and gear recommendations, tier lists, and all kinds of other things. So check out the links down below. And don't forget to enjoy the music, and that honesty is the best policy.